Hello, everybody, and welcome back to No More Mondays, the podcast where we believe you can have a thriving career, business, and life on your terms. I am your host, Angie Callen. This episode is brought to you by The Modern Coach, my platform for making sure that humans still matter and adapt to the future of work. If there is one thing that we have learned in over 200 episodes of No More Mondays, it is that core values are essential to creating that thriving career, business, and life. If you are ready to grow with purpose, check out themoderncoach.co/core values and start figuring out what is most important to you. And now it's time to get on with the show that I am very excited about today. Y'all know I love talking about the future of work, and today's episode is going to hit a little differently on that front. We are not only going to talk about what might happen, but what is actually happening right now as technology and AI disrupt the way that we are working faster than ever before, and also what that looks like as we try to adapt it in our teams and our businesses and in our lives. I am excited for you to meet James Varnham, who is here all the way from Copenhagen, Denmark. He is a global sales leader, transformation expert, and AI trainer who has helped tons of teams across Europe, Middle East, and the US adopt new tech without losing their minds, their people, or most importantly, their humanity, which is music to my ears. We met at the ICF conference a few weeks ago and had the chance to sit down at lunch and talk all about AI adoption. It was fantastic. And what stuck with me most from James' session that I attended wasn't so much the talk about AI, but the energy in the room and the response to how to adopt it. Skepticism is a little high, resistance is real, and we're going to dig into how you can work around that. So without further ado, James, welcome to No More Mondays.
Thank you so much, Angie. It's great to be here.
You know, it's funny how you go to an event and somehow like you just gravitate towards the people that you're supposed to meet. And so, I attended James's session because I really wanted to pick up on the tone of AI in the coaching world. And then we just happened to be in the lunch line together and got to eat and talk a lot about what I think we're going to get into today as far as what's really going on with the adoption of AI, how leaders can support it, and why this moment is just as much about people as it is technology. And so, James, I'm curious for you, ICF session or otherwise, as you have these conversations with people and teams adopting AI, what are you continually surprised about as this comes on the scene?
Well, I suppose not so surprised anymore, but there is a really big variance, which has something to do with, as you said, people are different. People have different motivations. They have different interests, different personality types, which either gravitates towards something new or shies away from it. And the one common thread through it all is that the noise around AI and the hype that is kind of amplified by media is either driving people with huge motivation to do some really great things with AI, but at the same time, and unfortunately probably the majority, is that it's driving people maybe not so much away, but keeping them in this kind of apathetic mode of not doing anything, right? So I mean, the analogy that I use, and for context, I don't think anyone will open up, LinkedIn today without stumbling over a number of threads about AI and building agents and, comment, comply if you want a 700-page Notion database of this, that, and the other.
So true.
People end up being quite confused about where to spend not only their money, but their time on learning. And as soon as you think you've made a decision, then something else pops up and you end up in this evil circle and kind of say, manana, I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow kind of never comes. So the analogy I use is like, walking into a electronics store because you have high ambitions of buying a new TV. And you go in there and you've got a wall of TVs that come in different shapes and sizes, but all more or less look the same, and they're all TVs. So you ask the assistant, what's the difference between that $5,000 one and the $1,000 one? And they give you some great explanations, and you think you made a decision. And then he says, but wait until Monday if you want the $5,000 one, because it's going to be half price because there's a new one coming out. And you get more and more confused, and you end up walking out with nothing because you don't want to feel ripped off. And there's my feeling is that there's a little bit of that, and this is coming from a point of view where, you know, I'm not a technical AI expert, but I've worked in, you know, the education industry for 25 years. I've worked within AI for 8 years around upskilling and bridging workforce gaps in emerging technologies, of which obviously AI is one. And but I've had to go through that myself, right? And what I've learned myself, out of interest and I guess direction, because I'm working in that space. But for a lot of people, it's not like that. So I kind of empathize. I feel like I'm pretty grounded with where people are and what they would feel. That's how I kind of draw some conclusions to things.
Well, and that's why you just nailed why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I'm a former engineer who loves people. And so I am similar when it comes to adopting technology. I don't create it. I was a civil engineer. The computer scientists called us the stone crushers. However, my ability to understand it and my level of curiosity in it is high. And so I find myself wanting to dabble in it. And, you know, also James and I stumbled upon the fact that we're pretty much similar age, similar that middle, the good old like young Gen X, old millennial we're good at adopting to technology. And we have to, because we have too much of our careers left not to be working in the way the future of work looks. But the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you is that similar perspective on the not over-indexing on technology for the expense of the people, right? And that humans, you know, I have bracelets made that say humans still matter. And there's many reasons they say that. Technology is only one of them. But that's why I wanted to talk about this, because I think that's part of why people there's like a feast or famine, right? We're either going to use it and use it all the time for everything, maybe over, right? The gold rush, let's go get as much as we possibly can. Or there's the, you know, I'm going to stay in the pre-developed city and not take the trail west kind of people that dig their heels in and don't necessarily want to adopt it. And there's a huge gray area there that I think people are overwhelmed by playing in. And I'm curious, as you've gotten into like workforce adoption of this, what have you seen be successful when trying to maybe ease some of the more resistant folks into this stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, this is really coming into the kind of L&D, the learning and development space, and about how you get a workforce to use a ubiquitous technology, right? That is almost like it will be the spine going through an organization. And I'm not saying that to scare or anything like that. And everything that I say today is not advocating complacency in learning. But I mean, first of all, a very short answer to the question is like no one has figured out the best way of doing AI adoption. Yeah. And the reason for that is you've got a technology which is replacing some jobs, like very repeatable tasks, but again, emphasize on the fact that AI is not going to come along and wipe out everyone's jobs. No. It will wipe out tasks within jobs, because there are tasks within jobs that can be completed by AI. But everything around that organization. So organizations are having to go through massive change management as agents and agentic workflows are coming into the workforce, having digital colleagues. You're going to end up having quite junior people that will have to have the core competencies of leaders to lead these agents. And that requires communication skills. It requires empathy. Remember that everything that we feed into AI is what we're going to get back out. So yep. They're going to need these types of skills. Huge process changes within organizations. So not just throwing AI on top of legacy processes, but kind of ripping them apart and starting again. And a lot of organizations are focusing just on the tech, right? We need to get people to know how to prompt, for example, or build custom GPTs, or focus in these very siloed architectures in their own business units to do things. Now, I think that's great for experimentation, and prototyping and seeing what works, but it needs a far more holistic view on adoption with all of these different aspects. Again, referencing back to the spine that's going to go through the organization, which is AI. Imagine the ribs being change management, leadership, process change, governance, ethics, and these are the ribs that are going to hold that spine straight. So no one's really doing it. There are some organizations out there that are kind of moving into that direction, but it's also very difficult, right, to have one organization that is experts at everything. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing with organizations. With people, as I said at the beginning, it differs person to person, personality types, demographics within the organization. People at the beginning of their career are probably, they're natives to technology, they're natives to hyper change in how we as a society are adopting technology. So you can say that, the latest generations, if you think about what they've had to grow up with, they've gone through a lot of change throughout their whole life. So they're probably more adapt to changing. Whereas those in, maybe our stage of life and maybe 10 years older than that are, what's the point? And it's kind of those that we really need to knuckle down on and make the hurdles a lot lower, so that they get these small incremental steps and they're organically driven to see how this technology can help them.
But you said something so interesting that I want to come back to in a slightly different context in a second. And that is essentially you have like non-human team members, right? You have agents that are colleagues now. I want to come back to that in a second in a kind of smaller scale capacity. But something you just said struck me as interesting. And that is that the dichotomy in the like generational ability to adopt or any emerging technology, AI or otherwise, is also interesting because the people who leading it are the ones who are not quite as good at adopting it or not quite as willing, right? So those people that are mid-career and older are the ones who are leading the younger ones who can come in here and stand up an agent in a day. And the more seasoned person who understands business doesn't quite understand that agent, right? So it's an interesting kind of push-pull, and I think highlights the fact that the workforce is changing and being changed not only by this, but generational shifts that this kind of highlights. And that takes change management to a whole new level. I spoke at an AI conference a month or two ago, and I did some research on some of the stuff that you just mentioned. And it's interesting because there's some companies in the US who broad scope rolled out AI in very specific areas of their businesses. Like Taco Bell was one of them, who basically replaced all of their customer service with chatbots. And guess what ended up happening? They had to unroll all of it because it was creating so many issues because they kind of in a silo stuck it in to one role instead of figuring out how basically it's a department that works cross-functionally across everybody. And that is an interesting thing that you kind of helped me put together. And now where I want to take that is a step down. There's a lot of people listening to this show who are solopreneurs, small businesses, or entrepreneurs of maybe 1 to 5 people. And I think it's really, really interesting to think about scaling this down to a tiny, tiny team where I might be one person doing business with a team of AI agents on my side. How do we get ourselves to start thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity for solopreneurs and small businesses increasingly, I mean, they're able to be increasingly more competitive with larger organizations because they can do so much more with so much less. And of course, the bureaucracy that you'll find in the larger organizations isn't there. Of course, you're going to have a culture of sorts, unless it's just you on your own. And then you don't have to worry so much about organizational culture. But if you're a small team, there are lower barriers to get into this. And that's a perfect example of, start experimenting, start prototyping, definitely invest in having employees, if they're not self-motivated, going out and spending, an hour or two a day playing around with AI to get them onto a course to get them learn something, and then have some organized steps to to experiment together continuously. So maybe once a month, take the whole team out and have a hackathon. I experienced that at a previous company, which was really cool. You all get together, you ideate some of the challenges that you've identified in the company over the last month, and then pick out a couple, split up into small teams, build something, and solve challenges in half a day. So big opportunities for that crowd. Yeah.
I think that I'm going to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is that, let's say, within a company, there, from a global perspective, the prediction is that AI will actually create jobs instead of net replace. The difference within that is, what are the jobs? And so it's a displacement, not a replacement, which I think you alluded to within an organization, and thinking about how we activate human level skills alongside these like technological coworkers to kind of change the ecosystem. And just one aside on this, kind of like the opportunity we as smaller business owners and entrepreneurs have is, this enables us to have more coworkers without the overhead of a whole lot of coworkers. And in my opinion, we have to get up to speed with this kind of stuff, or we will be replaced by the competitors who have. And so that's the difference we're starting to see, is like at the bigger scale, the full-on disruption isn't there yet. It will come. At our little levels, though, I think that there's this idea that, like, if I am not staying up on this, I will eventually be taken over by a competitor who is, because they can do more with less. And that's where I think we have an opportunity. And I have been nerding out on building AI agents. It is so fun.
Yeah.
A little bit of an addiction.
Yeah. Once you get into the rabbit hole. Yeah. And it's the important thing is, and it's quite an ambiguous statement, kind of taking things back to the space where I play in with AI, which is kind of very human centric, and trying to understand messages or guidance that's being given. The amount of times that I've heard, we just need to find the right use case. And if you don't know about AI, what does that mean, right? You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what a great use case is. Maybe you're not super creative and you can't think like holistically in that sense. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that type of guidance tends to not be super helpful. So, it really needs to be broken down. I mean, agentic workforce is all of this, and this conversation will be completely different in 12 to 18 months. Well, we'll
bring you back. We'll do a 2.0 and we'll say, okay, what changed in the last 2 years?
Yeah. But what I'm, really interested in is the hundreds of millions of people that are using AI actively every single week and still using it relatively unintelligently. And there's as we saw at the conference during my sessions, in 20 minutes, you can completely change someone's point of view of how they work with it.
I was shocked at, and no shade to all of you who are listening, if you fall into the categories we're about to talk about, but it'll just be your little push to get curious about this stuff. I was shocked that the majority of that room had never done anything beyond use a thread inside of, ChatGPT, for instance. And some of them were even still using a thread.
Yeah.
And I was talking, and it's funny because I was talking to a client last week who's like, similar age, in a position to be able to use this stuff. And he's just like, I'm kind of skeptical. And in 10 minutes, I was like, here's a 101 lesson. And he was like, oh, wow, I guess that isn't so big of a deal. And so the barrier isn't that high. I think it's mentally a little challenging for people to get over it.
Yeah. And it's all about curiosity. Remember, AI, as much as it is a tool to help us do things, it can be a very helpful tool to ask questions to. And from a human perspective, not all humans are very good at asking questions. And if that's something
actually a very good point.
If you've been used to that, during, when I was growing up, it was, in London, little boys should be seen and not heard, right? And that kind of, gets into your head gradually, and then you end up kind of in this imposter syndrome when you're at school of, I don't really understand that, but should I ask a question? Because I don't know whether that's a silly question or not a silly question. So I'm just going to be quiet because I don't want to come across as stupid. And you end up kind of going down a road of figuring things out for yourself, whereas maybe there would have been a lesser resistance by actually asking the question. And if that's part of your personality, it doesn't come naturally to ask AI, I don't get it. Explain this to me in a different way. Explain it to me. I don't know how to solve this. Run me through it. And that's really the whole takeaway really with AI, is to be super curious, super like probe it, question it. It doesn't judge you. It's not a human. It won't call you stupid. Sometimes you have to
does the exact opposite of judge you and call you stupid.
Yeah.
In fact, you should be questioning it sometimes when it tells you all of your ideas are amazing.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and that's kind of like where the personality, the human personality, is coming into play with it. We treat it.
That's a very good point, and this was part of the early part of your session that I really appreciated. With people think, what's the prompt that's going to get me the output? There is no prompt. I have always just approached AI as if it was basically like a humanoid, and just I talked at it almost, and I would just stream of conscious, like, here's all this stuff that's going on because I don't know what to tell you, and I accidentally ended up doing exactly what works. But I never thought of the fact that, like, that's how I approached it. But some people may not be. I'm a coach. I like to ask lots of open-ended questions, so it comes naturally to me. But that's the whole thing, is that there isn't like a single magic question. It is a series of conversation with it. And the more comfortable you get and more curious you get about how to work a conversation to get the output that you seek, the better your output gets. Yeah.
Like, I find it, I have two small children, right? 2.5 and 4.5. And it's so amazing, and all parents are going to say this, it's so amazing, like watching them grow and understanding how you need to communicate with them in order for them to get them to do what you want to do. And this is stuff that they've never experienced before. So you need to break things down to micro level. They have no context about some stuff. And that's helped me with AI, actually, because again, we take it for granted. It gives super plausible, intelligent output. And all of a sudden you believe that you're speaking to an adult that has context, that has previous knowledge. And if you don't provide the right context, you aren't going to get the right thing. It's a reflection. AI is a reflection of the questions and input
it is.
You ask it or give it.
Yeah.
So,
So be careful. What you want it to mirror back is one thing. Sometimes it's fun to ask it to explain to you things as a 5th grader, which is kind of fun. But the childlike approach to it is really is a good thing to think about, because a friend of mine sent me, I think it was a TikTok of a neuroscientist in PhD in London who was talking about something that I think is adjacent to what you just brought up. And it's why it feels like we're talking to something sophisticated, but we're not. And it's because the language models have perfect syntax and perfect grammar, but they don't have depth of thought or depth of narrative. And it is a weird juxtaposition, because rarely, if ever, do you find a human who has really solid grammar and a level of intelligence to have, that disconnects to weak narratives. And so it's this contradiction in and of itself that makes it feel like, hey, I'm talking to this like really knowledgeable, sophisticated adult, but it has limited knowledge, limited narrative building capacity, can only operate on what you give it. And therefore, at some point, you will end up in a loop. And so you can't blindly trust it and can only drive it so far.
Yeah. Narcissists love it, right? Because it just agrees and tells you you're amazing.
That's the greatest idea. And you're like, is it really? And then
Yeah.
you're like, you'll give it the complete opposite idea. And it's like, that's a great idea too. So
Yeah.
enablement tool, not human replacer, everyone, which I think brings us back to a question I want to ask that really roots into you as in the human center of this kind of AI and TEAM adoption. So if we've got leaders out there who are really trying to figure out how they can make the most of their humans and be most human as this AI comes into play, what do you tell those people when you're starting this with them?
That's a really good, well phrased question. Yeah, I mean, going back to kind of looking at the whole, and it would differ, of course, a little bit from organization to organization, like the size of it as well. But I think that the culture and the work around change and making certainly a workforce with where you have people there who may be reading things about AI taking your job, you need to make it, and it is becoming a increasingly used term, of a psychologically safe place, that this isn't something that is going to take your job. We're not weaseling you into a trap by doing all of this. So I think that that's a really, really important part. I think controlled experimentation is really important. People need to be able to play with it in order to actually figure things out. You can't go on a 1 or 5 day course and learn a bunch of stuff, and then all of a sudden that's the light switch that's gone on. You really need to play with this, test out all of the different, if your organization hasn't decided on any one model to go with, or you haven't picked up licenses, try them all and see what works, and where you get the initial gains, and then start gradually working into things, right? Take them, map the different business units, understand where AI falls in within the frontier. So the really obvious wins around the best use cases of AI, which is, creativity and writing and all of this sort of stuff, and get your early wins there. And from there, it will gradually start spreading out. And you can really get down in the weeds, right, with complicated agentic workflows and agents working with agents who are working with agents. But don't worry about that to start with, yeah.
I'll go nerd for a second. And this is, Mom, I'm sorry, the following is going to sound like a foreign language. I know you're listening, and she's like, what are they talking about? I have been in the N8N rabbit hole now. And it is like, I'm like, every time I unlock a new level, I'm like, it can do that, where it's like build an N8N and then it talks to like a chat GPT assistant so that it can actually like pull your voice and repurpose content. And it is like amazing what this kind of stuff could do. Kind of freaky and scary, but the big thing about it is it's replacing what used to be manually automated task level work with fully automated task level work. And in my opinion, what that means is that we get to activate human skills more. And as we think about how to bring this into, I love the idea of holistically thinking about where AI sits in an organization instead of just trying to shove it into the first obvious, task replacer, because that's when you get to really take advantage of the fact that this can replace that repetitive crap that just is a bunch of man hours. And then those man hours get to be done with some, by an actual human who is more creative, gets to do more creative work. And that's what I think is interesting as we think about how to change organizations across the board.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying for several years now that AI is really just enabling the workforce to become a workforce of decision makers. That's what we're going to end up having to be doing. We have to make decisions. We're not going to be needing to do the donkey work that we've had to do before, and that requires that requires a certain human skill that needs to be trained consistently, which is, you could say, under threat with AI, and that's critical thinking and cognitive effort. And this brings the human into play again as well, because there are studies done that show, Carnegie Mellon and Microsoft Research did a really good study on the impact on cognitive effort when using AI. If you are very confident at a subject, or not very confident at a subject or a task. And it showed that if you're not confident, your cognitive effort goes way below the baseline if you weren't using AI in the first place. And if you are confident at the task, if you would have been able to have completed that without AI, you know the subject matter, you're an expert in this, your cognitive effort goes way above the baseline, which shows that when humans know what they're talking about and use AI, that is the powerful match.
Yes.
We then question it, probe it. I say we unlock these little boxes of creativity in our brain that we didn't know exist. And AI helps unlock all of that stuff. So critical thinking is a super important thing that needs to have not just indirect subconscious focus on that, increasingly to maintain integrity and authenticity as a human, need to make sure that that's in place, right?
Well, because the flip side of that is like a danger zone, right? So if you've got enough subject matter expertise and cognitive ability to understand a car you're driving, great, you can do great with it. However, if you put a 10-year-old behind the wheel and they haven't been taught how to drive, it becomes really dangerous. And so you've got to be careful what you can get yourself into. And I think what's interesting about the critical thinking is I think that was already a little at risk from pre-AI, just digital technologies and younger generations having so much access to information that could mimic decision making. And so, and now maybe this will ironically push us back into this like critical thinking about how we're being enabled. And also you had I don't know that you had any idea that you just brown nosed a little bit because go Carnegie Mellon alumni.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I used to, so many years ago now, I think 12, 13 years ago, I consulted for Carnegie Mellon.
There you go.
Yeah, on a World Bank funded project with their computer science faculty. So
yeah, you don't go to Carnegie Mellon and not be curious about technology. So yeah, there you go. And I they are doing fantastic. I mean, they were robotics and everything when I was there was huge, and so they are at the forefront. So I appreciate the surprise callback.
Well, I had no idea. So that was for everyone that's watching. That was like that. That was no.
That was unplanned.
Yeah.
All right, James, where does everybody find you? So if there's a team out there who's like, man, I need this guy's, non-American accent and humor and ability to get my team on board with this stuff, where do we find you and follow along with your knowledge in this space? Because I surround myself with people who love humans and also who love technology and can find a way to balance them. And I really love your perspective on this. So how does everybody out there keep in touch with you?
Yeah, well, right now, probably the best place to keep in touch with me is on LinkedIn. Yep. So, I've kind of, I would say, unintentionally fallen into speaking and doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I would say reach out to me there and we'll figure it out.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
And we're connected and we will fill your feeds with human and AI things. So if you're following here on LinkedIn, easy to find. If you are listening out in podcast land, we will have all of this in the show notes. And as we wind things down, I'm gonna pose one more thought-provoking question to you, and that is, in your work in this kind of human technology AI intersection, what's something that gives you hope about how humans and machines are going to evolve together?
I read something today. So I've this is going to be more than 1 minute. I've been reading threads and the people that are very anti AI in the sense that it has too much bias. It's bad. It's going to be bad for the climate. It's bad for the global south. It can lead to bad things. They're highly relevant, highly important conversations. And the way that I've explained it is that you have to find there's no technology that's perfect. You have to find a balance. And if there is a technology that creates substantially greater good than bad, then we need to mitigate the bad and we need to, pour fuel on the fire of the good. And I read today, there was a chap who's been working in AI for a long, long time. His in Denmark, and I read it very briefly. His father was diagnosed with an extremely rare case of cancer. The doctors tried the traditional routes of treating him. None of that worked. So his son used AI, dug into, got all of cited research about it from all around the world, and with treatments that have been tried and tested and all of that sort of stuff. Very long story short, he provided this, this data and this information to the doctors. They said, okay, let's try it. And his condition changed immediately. And that would not have been possible, right? And he said himself, if I'd known that this would have been, if using or being able to use AI, being an AI, working with it for many years, would have a direct impact on life and death in my family. Yeah, what an amazing thing, right? So that might sound very glamorous, but I read it today, so it was a good question, because that is what I think can give us some hope, right? It will help us with some things, and for sure there's going to be bumps along the road, and we just need to mitigate them, just like we mitigate the internet and cyber attacks, right? We just need to figure it out. So yeah, sorry for that long answer.
No, that was there. You did not have a time restriction. I'll tell you that now that you're done. A couple years ago, right as generative AI was hitting the mainstream scenes, because we have to remember, artificial intelligence isn't as new as we feel like it is. It's just now accessible to the plebeians. And back when it was first hitting the scene, I think ChatGPT had just been released. I had a guest on the show named Manoush Agrawal. So all of you should follow him if you're curious about this AI stuff. And he said something to me that made me very curious and in a, I'm not sure I believe you way. And now I really understand what he meant. And that is that AI can bring us incredible levels of intellect, right? IQ. It can bring information to us, but what it doesn't have is emotional intelligence. And so we're moving into an ecosystem where IQ is heavily enabled, which, according to him, will theoretically increase our EQ, because it's going to have to, right? Like you said, we're going to have more critical thinking and human skills in order to, leverage what enabled us. And I think that's kind of what we've landed upon today. Is now I've come full circle, and I'm like, yep, Manoush was onto something. We have this AI, IQ powered machine that will help us get even a little bit more creative, and in some ironic way, maybe even a little bit more human. Who knows? We'll have to find out when you come back in a couple of years and we do an update on the state of AI in humans, James.
We're all in a bunker. Yeah. No.
Thank you so much for being here today. To everybody out there, AI can enable us to do so much. The healthcare story was kind of the perfect pin in the end of this conversation. That isn't just the end, it's the beginning of quite an interesting future of work that we are about to see, as long as we bring AI into our worlds thoughtfully and intentionally. And if you feel pressured to catch up, I hope this conversation gives you a little bit of permission to get curious and reframe how you approach this change that is happening in this working world, whether you like it or not. And it's not about becoming that robot or becoming something you don't want to be. It is becoming the more human and authentic version of the leader, coach, or creator that you already are. James, thank you so much for joining me and having such an important discussion. If you're not already connected with him, go find him here on LinkedIn. He's sharp, grounded, and definitely somebody that you want in your network as all this comes rolling in. So thanks again for being part of No More Mondays.
Thanks ever so much, Angie. It was a pleasure.
If this episode hit home, share it with a friend, give us a review, share it all over the world as we get these conversations out to more and more people. Transformation doesn't just start with tech, everybody. It starts and will always remain with people. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next week for another edition of No More Mondays.